Done. Can everyone hear me? I get the feedback in my ear, so I'm not sure if everyone can hear. Okay, well, welcome everyone. It's nice to see a really full room. So I'm imagining that there's a great deal of empathy here with the challenge of improving, not just building, but improving and sustaining performance through learning within an organization. I'm Ettie McCormack. I've been with Unisys for 13 years this year, and up until last year I was the head of the corporate university within the EMEA region, which covered Europe, UK, Africa and Middle East, serving the needs of about 15,000 people within that region. And at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2007, I moved into a global position around competency management. And what I've been doing since then is working on providing the tools, processes and frameworks that support and underpin the talent management strategy for Unisys. So a little bit of what I'd like to share with you today. To put Unisys into context, some of you may not be familiar with what Unisys does, but this is who we are. We provide IT services and solutions. Our key delivery areas are in consulting, outsourcing, and one way or another, particularly through the lines of business that we specialize in, you've probably come into contact with Unisys, maybe even without knowing it. So any of you who still use the old-fashioned way of writing a check to pay your monthly bills, probably 80% of those are processed by Unisys as part of a business process outsourcing arrangement that we have. Alliances and partnerships that we have are with these people and with some others, but these are our key partnerships and alliances. So that's enough about Unisys to let you know who we are. Today, I wanted to share with you these 4 key areas and would like to demonstrate with 2 examples where we're applying this within Unisys. First example comes from our service delivery organization, so it's our IT services, and the second one is in our leadership development. So they're both quite contrasting cases, but I wanted to share with you because of the opportunities that it provides us in more than just one area. And you could be forgiven for thinking that, you know, because we're an IT services organization, that IT is purely our focus of attention. As we'll discover, it's couldn't be further from the truth. You can have lots and lots of skills, but how do you bring that all into play together? So, what I'd like to do, and in the spirit of pushing the envelope and testing out the new technology, we're looking at a polling situation here. So what you will have found when you arrived is a little keypad. I'm going to try and not talk like Chris Tarrant, but let's ask the audience. The question for you to think about is, from these 5 areas, what would you say is the key people-related issue that faces your organization today? So take a few seconds, read the answers, and make a selection. Everyone finished voting? Okay. When we look at the results, we can see that there are 2 that are clearly in front: creating a performance-driven culture and the skills gaps in critical positions. That's actually not too far removed when you're reading all of the research, all of the studies, all of the latest thinking around the workforce issues. And this is research that comes from people like CIPD, the Conference Board, the Corporate Leadership Council, all are clearly in agreement that some or all of these are hurting us today. So when we think about this in terms of discovery, then within Unisys, when we considered it, it fell into three broad areas about where the biggest gaps are for us. They tend to be in the technical and professional skills, management and leadership skills, so building that leadership pipeline, and not just relying on succession planning, which is pretty much for the here and now, but building talent, which takes time over 2 or 3 years through that pipeline, so that you can start thinking of them in terms of succession. And more people are recognizing the fact that an organization is a living organism, and that the emotionally intelligent organization has the awareness of itself, its place in the marketplace, and also has that self-discipline and rigor around the issues as well when you're looking at empathy, engagement, which is also another hot topic, employee engagement. Within Unisys, we took all of this information, and this is the result of several iterations. But when you're looking at a talent management strategy, for us it became very much a question of putting the competencies at the heart of it. So when you think about the performance wheel, and you're looking at all of these areas for an organization in a competing market, then these are all the areas where we need to have some clear strategies ready to implement. Now the challenge with this is it's all very well when you're looking at it, and as a strategy it can be great, but it's full of management speak and people speak, HR jargon. For us, how do you actually take this model and provide it in a change management setting in such a way that it resonates and means something to your employee force? In other words, how do you provide them with the clarity so that they understand what is their role within that performance wheel? And so from an employee perspective, these are the sorts of questions that we would encourage people to ask themselves. As any employee, I would also be asking myself these questions. And what are, from a competency perspective, what are the different skills and knowledge and ability that I either need to bring to the role that I'm playing, or that I need to develop for the role I might be playing tomorrow? And again, when you're encouraging that talent management thinking, it's not just about the role that you fulfill today, it's what could you be doing in a year's time. Not just to feed the aspirations of the individual, but where your market may be taking you. Because the market drives it. Within Unisys, when we looked at the IT services, so this is the first example I was going to share with you, we identified that we needed to build the critical competencies that had been prioritized as a matter of an imperative from a business perspective in the key areas that we were operating in. So these became known as our strategic programs, and we identified with the help of the business what these critical skills and competencies would be. Then taking a rather tired dictionary that hadn't been looked at for a number of years, and that was reflected in the fact that it had rather old skills in it, really needed to be refreshed and inventories built so that we could then take it out into the workforce and help people to assess. Not in a judgmental way, but actually part of the change management and part of the communication was because we wanted to provide the right learning at the right time and at the right pace so that these people could develop their competencies where it's needed. So having conducted the assessment, being able to look at the gaps that you have. So if we understand that our demand planning identifies that we need a particular skill because of the market that's growing and we want to be there ahead of the game rather than behind the curve every time, then we need to be able to know where we're going and understand what we have, which is where the reporting and the gap analysis really helped us to identify, because then what you find, and I'll be very honest with you, there were a lot of gaps. More perhaps than we'd anticipated. So then it becomes an issue of recognizing that we have these gaps. We need to do some implementation planning, because you can't remove your whole workforce to go and have all of this training. You can't go out and buy all of it. So therefore, you have to think about where you're going to prioritize, where you're going to make the investments, both in time, resource, and finance. And look at other options, whether that be offshoring some of the work, outsourcing it, making sound judgments about when it's appropriate to bring in contractors, so on and so forth. But at least with the right information up front, you can make some informed decisions around it. So the underpinning for us was around strengthening the competency database, regenerating its content, and applying some processes around the governance, because the huge effort that had gone into updating this dictionary really means that you can't take your eye off the ball. The minute you turn your back for 6 months even, the information in there actually becomes redundant very, very quickly. Okay, so with all of this knowledge, what did we do? Because we recognized that we did have a number of gaps, but we had decided that we were concentrating on our strategic programs. And what we did in this particular example was making sure that the learning was linked to curricula, that great old-fashioned word, specifically around building skills and competencies. So you could provide the right learning at the right time, and actually did it with the help of both managers and employees so that they could identify where they needed to concentrate. It was also very helpful because it kind of forced the kinds of conversations where managers could enforce the imperative that said, no, these are the strategic programs that are important and where we need to focus on. And I understand that you may have pet projects or particular customers or a particular contract that you're supporting, and that's okay, but that's not where the investment's going to be. So, using that as an opportunity to see where else you could apply it, and thinking about the kinds of learning that are available. We heard some of it this morning from Jay, and where it's all kind of going, and the explosion and proliferation, and sometimes the challenges that that can create as well. But these are just a few examples of where blended learning really is a critical piece of how do you get the learning out to people when you can't afford to take them out for 2 or 3 days. In some instances, you can't even afford to take them out for the day. When your organization's revenue comes from 85% of your workforce, then it becomes a really difficult rationalization to make. Before we get carried away, though, let's just remind ourselves that there's nothing new under the sun. So the previous slide, which talked about wikis and Web 2, which is almost being treated as the second coming by some people, is actually that second wave of the technology learning. But just to help put some things into perspective, a very quick journey back through time. When we think about distance learning, it's actually quite sobering to think that back at the beginning of the century, just as wireless was starting to take off. The example that I have here is from early pioneering times in Australia, where you had the Flying Doctor, to the School of the Air. Now, in 1951, in Australia, think about Alice Springs, one of the most remote inhabited places in the earth. You don't step out of your door in the morning and make your way to school to play with your mates and talk to your teacher. So you have to look for unorthodox ways in which to get the learning to these remote children. And from the Flying Doctor service, somebody had this bright idea that you could use the wireless network to actually bring communities together. That was how that started to educate children. This one is certainly within a lot of our lifetimes. The Open University, that was born in what Harold Wilson called the white heat of technology. That almost sounds hackneyed now when we think about it in our terms. But let's not forget the white heat of technology has been around a lot longer than we perhaps give it credit for. And then certainly within living memory of everybody in the room, I would hope, late 80s, beginning 90s, where the e-learning revolution, how many conferences did we go to? This was going to be the next best thing, the next big ticket. The anytime, anywhere, and the incipient challenges that created, because if it was any time and anywhere, then most managers actually naturally assumed that any time and anywhere was okay as long as it was your anytime and your anywhere, not in my time. So that created a number of challenges as well. But I just give you that brief guided tour through history and remind ourselves that, again, there is nothing new under the sun. They are paradigms that get shifted over time. Which leads me on to my second example now in our leadership development and our collaboration with INSEAD, which has been going on for the last 3 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, as we've built a leadership development program. And every year, this is now our third iteration, so we have the alumni from the previous years who have helped us to refine, improve, and the brains from INSEAD that actually bring to bear as well. But at the end of last year, for this year's intake, we actually introduced a new way of thinking and jumped on the back of some work that INSEAD had been doing for the last couple of years. And they've gotten into Second Life in a big, big way. And we thought, well, why don't we try that? We're an IT organization. Again, just a quick, brief history. In terms of Second Life, its origins are really in the virtual gaming world. And as we know, that's been around for a lot of years. I'm not going to talk about the technology, but if you think about, in a virtual world, the objective of the game is to achieve the quest or reach the goal and use the resources that you either pick up along the way or that you create for yourself. The characters that you meet and whether you choose to collaborate with them or not to come together and get closer to your goal. So it kind of sounds familiar to the business environment. And what organizations like INSEAD have done from an academic perspective and IBM have done very successfully is actually tap into that and say, well, if it works in a virtual world for gaming, what about achieving organizational goals and bringing people together who can think about the resources that they need to bring, can share information and collaborate to get the job done. So that's how it kind of comes from. INSEAD at Second Life have their own virtual campus. They've built an island. You can actually go to the beach, you can go to bars, you can go to various auditoria to go and listen to your lectures and interact with the professor giving that particular lecture. What we did with our intake for this year, and every year we have the kick-off at the INSEAD campus. So the experience is very real for the individuals who are taking part. They have lunch in the restaurant, they meet the professors, they're introduced to the schedule of activities that there's going to be, and they will come together again maybe another 3 times through the course of the year, face to face. In the interim period, you have to maintain those relationships and the assignments that you're going to work on and attend your various modules virtually. But already you've got in your mind a very physical and real picture of what the campus looks like, what the professor looks like, and so it's easier to maintain. So that when we come together to attend the various lectures within Second Life, how many of you, just a quick show of hands, we've all kind of heard of it, how many of you are Second Lifers or have dabbled? Okay. Virtually. Okay. Well, within Second Life, people adopt personas. So here is an example. This is a class that was taken at the end of last year, and these are some of our students. That's the professor. And so, you know, lots of talent that we're building, but I do worry about some of them. Truly. Because the anonymity, and this allows us to have some fun with it as well, which really kind of brings us to my almost penultimate slide. Why do we do this? And for us, it's about the desire to experiment. Year on year, this leadership program introduces something new. For us, this has been new. And because we want to improve the results of our executive development. The school's interest in the education is infectious. They already have the resources. They're like kids in a sandpit playing. They love this. We're just hanging on to their coattails and learning from it. And because what we innovate today, we actually look for application within our organisation in other areas. So remember the IT example that I gave you earlier on, our IT services? Who's to say that for some of the key strategic programs you couldn't use the same thing? And the last one, because it's not just about the race to get there, it's how you get there. And I think that's a theme that's going to be heard time and time again over the next 2 days. It's about being able to have some fun along the way. So from a practical perspective, and this was really interesting to me, hearing Jay this morning, who are the teachers? You know, from a practical and a tactical and an operational point of view, you know, your teachers are anywhere and everywhere. And that's the here and now. But, you know, never forget that we need to continue thinking strategically, and that as we continue on the journey, think about, well, what is the next paradigm that we need to shift? So that's really all I wanted to share with you, was the experience that we've had over the last couple of years. Thank you very much.